Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kama Daf Lamed Vav. We are on the last line of Lamed Hayim Bet. Let's share screen and get started. So, where are we? What have we been doing? We are. Yesterday, we learned a Mishnah that addresses A, renting a cow to B, who then lent the cow to C. So the cow then died of natural causes. And our Mishnah noted the following debate. Tanakama says that B can swear that the cow died of natural causes and be exempt because he's a renter. He's paying for the right. So if it dies of natural causes, he's paid for that. So he's off the hook. But a borrower is not off the hook if it dies of natural causes. It doesn't make a difference why the animal dies, unless the animal dies while working, doing the work for which you borrowed it. Basically, you're going to be liable. And so as a result, C is going to, according to the Tanakama, owe B, the person that he rented from, the value of the cow, right? So even though of the value that the person that he borrowed it from, the value of the cow. So again, I rent my cow to Stan. Stan lends his cow to Ken, and now all of a sudden, Stan ends up making money on my cow, which is of course what upset Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, "How can Stan make money with David's cow? That's not right. Stan doesn't really own the cow. He just was nice and lent it out to Ken. Why should Ken be liable to him?" And so Rabbi Yossi says, "No. Ken owes me owes David the money, owes the person who owns the cow the money, because he's the one who's liable, and I'm the one who at the end of the day lost the cow. So that's what makes the most sense. So that was
John Deere truck.
Okay, a John Deere truck instead. Yeah, okay, we could do the truck. It's 100%, absolutely. So the bottom line is, we have this debate now. We're going
Weren't
to.
we saying yesterday that that A lends the cow to B?
No, A rents the cow to B.
I'm sorry. Well, he rents the cow to B, and then A borrows it back from B. That there wasn't a third person. There's just two people, and that was so confusing.
No, that was the case that the Gemara discussed as an implication of our Mishnah, but that wasn't our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is three people. But you're absolutely right that was the case that was very confusing. That was the case that we dealt with yesterday, where A rents it to B, then B lends it back to A, and then B rents it back from A, and back and forth. So that was the case that we dealt with yesterday. And maybe, the bottom line was that maybe A could end up owing multiple cows to B,
right.
even though he had rented it to B. So that 100%, that was the case that we dealt with yesterday. And again, all of that was basically framed within the Tanakama. And again, I'm not sure. I don't think that we paskin like the Tanakama. I think we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, which there's a tremendous sense to. But in any event, that's where we were yesterday. But the bottom line now is, today we're going to address in those same situations. A rents it to B. So I rent it to Stan. Stan lends it to Ken. Now, God forbid, the cow dies or the truck dies. So now that the truck has died, Ken and Stan have oaths that they need to make in order potentially to make them free of liability. So what offerings do they need to make? And the Gemara is going to pick up at the bottom line of Lamed Hayam Bet, and it's going to tell us that there are four different possibilities. If you were to make a Punnett square, I think that's what it's called, you would have all the four different possibilities that you could have. We're going to see that sometimes both of them are all right. So let's we don't need to say it outside. Let's go straight in. Rebbe Yirmiyah. There'll be times where the two of them, Stan and Ken, in our example, are going to both need to bring a sin offering if they were to have sworn falsely. Pamim, and now we turn to Lamed Vavam and Aleph. Pamim sheshnehem ba'asham. There will be times where both of them bring an asham offering. Pamim shahasoker b'chatas ba'shoa ba'asham. There'll be times where one of them, namely the renter, i.e. Stan, will have to bring a chatas, and Shoel, the borrower, namely Ken, will have to bring an asham, and Pamshia socher ba'asham ba'shoel b'chatas. And sometimes the renter will have to bring an asham, and the borrower will have to bring a chatas, a sin offering. So, Haketa, how do we have all these different possibilities? And what is the theory behind them? Well, here's the theory. Firas mamon asham. If you swear falsely and and the oath is what allows you to avoid paying money, then you bring an asham. Bitoy svasayim chata. But on the other hand, if you swore falsely and it had no impact on your liability, well, then you bring a sin offering. Because those are the two situations. We have at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, Parakeh, the situation where you bring an asham offering, and that's in connection with a false oath, and that's the offering that's discussed there. And then generally, if you do something that's a false oath, then you have a bituy svasayim, then you have a sin offering. So let's take a look. Now we're going to break it down and do the four situations. So pamim sheshneim b'chatas, how do you? So there'll be sometimes where both of them will be offering us a sin offering. So what's the example? Kagon, for example, shemezud kedarka. The animal died in its normal course. V'amru nansa, and they say it was stolen by bandits. Okay, so meaning that it was nansa is and essentially an unavoidable accident. But in here it was in a way that it was taken away. So socher, when it comes to the renter, the benkach or benkach mifter patur, it doesn't make a difference whether it died of natural causes or it was stolen by bandits. He may not have realized this, but either way, he would not be liable. Meaning, if he would have said honestly the fact that it died of natural causes, he would be not liable. And so as a result, bechatas, he's going to bring a sin offering. And Shoel, and when it comes to the borrower, the benkach or benkach chiyav mechayev bechatas. And again, it doesn't make a difference. His oath is not going to get him out of having to pay. The point is the irony of this situation is that here, maybe he thought that he was going to avoid having to pay because it was plundered. Tough luck. If you are a borrower and you get held up by armed robbers, you are going to have to pay the guy back. So in both those situations, the oath didn't affect liability, and therefore you bring a sin offering. That's case number one. Okay, case number two. Pamim shishneim ba'asham kagon shenignava. Now, in case number two, the actual cow in real life was stolen. Okay, so that's going to create liability, and indeed create liability for both of them. V'amru mesa machmas malacha. But they both say that it died as a result of the work that it did. Well, that oath that they made would have made them not liable. So the tarvayu kakapri mamona. So both of them in this situation are denying the monetary obligation. And they would thereby be required to pay if you knew that in fact the animal had been stolen. The kapatri nafshayu, and they exempted themselves. So as a result, now that we know that they swore falsely, they both need to swear to bring an asham offering. So third case. How is it possible for the renter to be obligated in a sin offering, whereas the shoel, the borrower, is obligated in an asham? That's easy. It died of natural causes. So ba'amru mesa machmas malacha, and they say it died due to its work. Well, stoker, when it comes to the renter, the benkach mifter patur, he's not liable. If he would have sworn truthfully, he would not be liable, because if the cow dies naturally, he's not liable. So as a result, that's why he's obligated in a sin offering. But Shoel, when it comes to the borrower, the mechayib mesa kedarka, if it dies in the normal way, it's going to be subject to his liability. And how did he avoid liability? He avoided liability by saying that it died kapater nafshe b'meisa machmas malacha. He made himself exempt through swearing that it died through the work that it was done. And so since he made himself exempt, as a result, he's going to be subject to ba'asham, to offering an asham. Okay, so now that's three cases. Fourth and final one, socher ba'asham v'shoa b'chatas. You've got a renter who's obligated with an asham and a borrower who's obligated with a sin offering. So how does that happen? So again, so we need to have the borrower's liability not change and the renter's liability change. So kagon shedignava. Imagine that the animal was stolen. V'amru mesa kadarka, and they both said that it died naturally, even though that wasn't true. So the socher, when it comes to the renter, he's obligated for theft and loss because there's a sense of liability of negligence in those cases. And so, but he will exempt himself by saying that it died naturally. So therefore, ba'asham, he has to bring an asham. But the shoel, the bein kach ubein kach, that when it doesn't make a difference whether the animal was stolen or it died naturally, he's going to be liable. So his oath didn't change his liability. So bechata, so therefore he would bring a sin offering. So my kamashalan.
So working the animal is not considered natural causes?
No, it's very important that we understand that if you borrow something, if you borrow a bicycle, let's say, and while you're riding it, it breaks. Well, the expectation is that you are going to ride the bicycle, and that's part of the riding the bicycle experience is the borrowing the bicycle is to ride the bicycle. So as a result, you will not be liable. On the other hand, if you take the bicycle, you put it in the garage, and now the handlebar falls off, so you will be liable for fixing the handlebar. So that's again, I don't know that specific case works out, but basically that's the way it works with an animal. But so if the animal dies while you're working it, that's what is it that's you were allowed to work it, and therefore it's it's the owner's loss. But if it dies of natural causes, then you are going to be liable.
Why? Why, if the animal died, wouldn't that be? I mean, why is one liable if the animal dies of natural causes?
Because the bottom line is that you took on, when you borrowed it, you did not pay for any usage of it, and you didn't, so we're going to make you as liable as we can for anything that happens to it. It is I don't have a great explanation beyond that. It may be that it's based on psukim, but because I don't think we've actually covered it yet. But the bottom line is that yes, you are going to be liable.
But why is he responsible if the animal dies of natural causes? The animal is
because I understand the issue that you're raising. I don't have a phenomenal answer for you. I can just say that is that when you borrow something from somebody, part of the responsibility that you take on is that you're going to be able to return it. Here, you were not able to return it in its current form because it died, and so you're going to be responsible for that. Okay, so my Kamash Malan, what is this all trying to teach us? Meaning, we already would know all of this on our own, because we know that Kfiras Mammon brings an Asham. We know that Bitui Sasayim brings a Chatas. So what are you teaching us? So La Pugim the Rabbi Ami. This all comes to contradict and show that we disagree with Rabbi Ami. Amar, because what does he say? Kol Shvu Shahadayanim Mishbiim Osa. Any oath that's required by judges, meaning that a court imposed oath, he believes that there's no sin offering that's associated with a false swearing, because he understands the pasuk that triggers the chatas offering as the following. This pasuk is from where is it? From Vayikra. Perek Hey Pasuk Dalid. O nefesh kisishava livate visfasayim. Or if a soul swears falsely with his lips. So what does kisishava tell us? Kisishava, that he swears mi'atzma. It means on his own. voluntarily, not as a result of Beis Din. So if you swear as a result of Beis Din, you're not going to be obligated in a sin offering. So Kamash Malan Deloka Rabbi Ami. So what this whole discussion has taught us is that we don't agree with Rabbi Ami. Now, one of the assumptions, not quite the assumption that Ken was concerned about, but one of the assumptions that we've discussed is actually not so clear in the rest of Shas, and Tosfos touches on it in the top Tosfos. Socher de Mechayev b'Geneva v'Aveda. We said that a renter is obligated in if an item is stolen or lost. Mikan yesh le'ochiach. So Tosfos says that from here we can show the halacha kamanda amar de socher ke shomer sachar dami, that a renter has the liability associated with a paid watcher, because a paid watcher is liable for Geneva and Aveda, but an unpaid watcher is not obligated in Geneva and Aveda. And so as a result, same as Reish Almana Kohen Gadol. So in Yevamos we saw this, Perak HaShoel, and so we'll see it in Perak HaShoel coming up on Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. Gabi Maremar, when Baruch Tanina Oger Kudnaisa Labei Chuzai, where he rents out mules to the people of Chozai, and it doesn't work out. So the
This seems a little bit odd here, because the renter is the opposite of the Shomer Sacher. In the Shomer Sacher, the owner is paying someone to watch the animal, whereas a renter is someone who's paying the owner. Just the opposite. The money is going the opposite way.
Yes, but remember in both cases there are services going the other direction. So the point is that the services, it's understood in both situations that it's a fair deal. Meaning, in one case I'm paying you for your cow, and in the other case you're paying me to watch the cow. But in both cases, there's something going back. In the case where I pay you to rent the cow, you're giving me the cow to borrow. I mean, you're giving me the cow to use. So you are giving me something of presumably equal value, because we negotiated a fair deal. And similarly, when you give me, pay me to watch your cow, I'm giving you back the services of watching the cow. So in both those situations, it's a situation of a fair transaction. On some level, there's no money going, there's no extra value going in either direction. Unlike a borrower who is only getting value and not giving value, and unlike an unpaid watcher who is only giving value and not getting value. So in the situation of the socher and the shomer sachar, if that actually is the most comparable, one could argue. And that's in fact what Tosfos is saying the halacha is, and is implied by our Gemara.
If the unpaid watcher is completely negligent, he has to pay.
Yes. If he's completely negligent, that's exactly right. Then he has to pay. But exactly. And that's what. And so we have essentially three main categories. We have the category of the borrower, who is the most liable, and that's why we're going to have him be liable even if the animal just drops dead, as long as it didn't drop dead while doing the work for which it was borrowed. Then the middle case, of course, is both the renter and the paid watcher. And then the most extreme case in the other direction of one who, and the most extreme case in the other direction of being not liable is the unpaid watcher. So those are the three different categories that we end up with. Okay, so Itmar. So now that we had that, the Gemara now turns to the question of whether a first watcher passing along the watched item to a second watcher triggers liability automatically. Now remember, in our Mishnah, there was an element of that, because I rented it to Stan lent it to Ken. So let's see, that obviously our Mishnah is going to come up as a question on one of those opinions, but let's take a look and we'll see. It's a machlokas between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. So Itmar, Shomer Shemasa L'Shomer, if one watcher gives it to another, Rav Amar Pater. Rav says you are not going to have any special liability as a result of doing that. Just doing that doesn't automatically make you liable. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chai. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, as soon as you do that, you did something you weren't supposed to, you're liable. So Amar Abaye L'Tamei de Rav, according to Rav, it's not only a situation where an unpaid watcher went ahead and gave it along to somebody that he paid to watch the item, where the Allahu Aliyah Alay where arguably you could say that the watching ends up being better because now this guy is getting paid to watch it. Even in the other direction, even if I paid Stan to watch it, and then Stan goes and gets Ken to watch it for free, even in that case, Rav would say no liability, no special liability. The Garuye Garalish or so. Then in that situation, the watching, let me finish, the watching ends up being diminished, and yet Patur, my timer, why is that? Because at the end of the day, somebody who has a fully capable person is watching the item. And so as a result, according to Rav, as long as you are treating the item with respect and thereby giving it over to somebody else to watch it in order, who is a normal person who's capable of watching the item that you are conveying, then there's not going to be any extra liability. So what do you have? You have a question on that, Ken? Go ahead.
And to whom are we discussing there may be a liability? The initial watcher or the second one?
Well, we're discussing the initial watcher. Does he have an automatic liability to the owner because he gave it to somebody else to watch? Right. So you say yes. So you're a Rabbi Yochanan guy. I'm totally with you as well. So okay. So let's take a look. L'taimei and the L'taimei de Rabbi Yochanan. It does seem like we may paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, at least based on the location of the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah note here. L'taimei de Rabbi Yochanan. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan? It's not lomi b'ayin shomer sakat shemasad l'shomer chinam. It's not only is there liability if a paid watcher gives it to an unpaid watcher, but the garuya gara l'shmira, so which of course is naturally going to make it less well watched because an unpaid person isn't going to watch it as well as a paid person. Even if Stan was unpaid when I gave it to him to watch, if he now gives it to Ken, who he paid to watch it, even in that situation, I'm still going to be Stan is still going to be liable, even though now arguably Ken is going to do an even better watching job than he did. And why is that? Why is this all liability going?
So it seemed that he has the agreement with the owner. The owner doesn't even know about person C.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's why the Amar lay, because the owner is going to say exactly as you're suggesting, Ken. I didn't want my watched item. Exactly. I didn't want this watched item to go into somebody else's hands. I gave it to you. I trusted you. So that is explanation number one.
Would think, all things being equal, which they never are in this world, that the person who's lending it to the second person would have the common decency to say to the person he got it from, well, this is what I plan to do.
100%. And we will see that if that in fact happens, then you're okay. Then that's okay. Exactly. Exactly. 100%. 100%. So, all right, let's take a look. So now
it's like subletting a place without
it's 100%.
Subletting. 100%. And the owner doesn't know about it. You're still responsible if you sublet.
Correct. Exactly. So Amar of Chista. Right now, of course, real estate could be different.
Could be.
But you're absolutely right. The principle seems very similar. So Amar of Chista now says Hadarav Lav b'feirishitmar. The fact that Rav says that you're not liable, it was never actually said by Rav. And this is, we can understand now why the halacha is almost certainly like Rabbi Yochanan, because the fact that we thought that Rav said this was based on another statement. Now, what was it? Ela Miklala. It was implied. Hanu Ginai, because there were these gardeners. Deko Yoma Havamafkade Maraihu Gabatahahi Sapta. There was an older woman that every day they would leave their hose with HOES as opposed to HOSE, but they would leave their hose with this particular woman to watch it. But one day they didn't have time, or whatever reason, they didn't actually make it to the woman's house. They just left it with one of the other gardeners. And what ended up happening? Shama Kala Be Halula. He heard about a wedding. Oh my gosh, I have a wedding to go to. So Nafak Azal Afkadinhu Lagaba Hadahi Sabta. So what did he do? He's like, well, every day we ordinarily give our stuff to this older woman. I'll go give all the stuff to the older woman, and everything will be wonderful. So Nafak Az, and then what? Unfortunately, the Azal V'Asa Ignu Marayu, but unfortunately, all of the hose were stolen before he came back. So Asal Kamei de Rav. And so it all came in front of Rav. And what did Rav do? Upatare. And Rav said, you're exempt. Why? Isn't it because Rav says that you're allowed to give, a one watcher is allowed to give it to another watcher? So Man Dechaza Savar, the person who saw this, thought that he was saying, Mishum Shomer Shemasal the Shomer Pater, that one watcher who gives it to another watcher is exempt. But but in fact, it isn't the case. Because what's the difference?
There is no difference.
No, there's a very big difference between a stam watcher giving it to another watcher and the gardener giving it to the woman who watches it on a regular basis. What's the difference? The difference is that the woman was already trusted, was known to be trusted by all the gardeners. So shiny hasam to kol yoma nami inhu gufayu gaba dahi savta habu mafkadalu. That every day all the people who were the gardeners would let the woman watch it.
Particular day, that lady wasn't present.
No, she was present. They never made it to her house. They just said, so we'll all be gardeners. Everybody on the daf will be the gardeners. And we have this woman outside the room. So usually we would go outside the room and give it to her, all of our hose. Right. But today we said, you know what, Stan, can you do us a favor? Just watch it today. We're too busy. We didn't have a chance to get to her. Right. And now you say, oh, sure, I'm happy to do it. But then you remember, oh my gosh, I have a wedding that I need to go to. So no, you gave it to the woman. You gave it to the woman.
So story then.
Exactly.
Story, then?
Of course, Rav is going to say that you're exempt in that situation because you know that all of us trust her. Exactly. So that's the point. So that's the humongous difference. So it's not fair for somebody to say based on that story that Rav would say that if you were watching it, you could give it to some other person, some regular person on the street. Of course you can't give it to somebody on the street. You know that we all trust the older woman, but you don't know that we all trust the person that you give it on the street to. So as a result, that's not a great proof to Rav's position.
Ultimately, the woman got the hose, the object. That's what she normally would receive from to watch, right?
Exactly. Okay. So now that we have that background, so now the question, now we have another question that we're going to say on. Now we're going to question Rabbi Yochanan effectively twice. Let's take a look, and we're going to see the question. Yes, we're going to. So 2 questions against Rabbi Yochanan, and we will answer both of them. Let's take a look. Yosef Rabbi Ami v'ka'amar la lahashemaita. So Rabbi Ami was teaching over this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. Esvei Rabbi Abba bar Mamel Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Abba bar Mamel asked Rabbi Ami, what about the following? And doesn't this have a problem for Rabbi Yochanan? Our Mishnah, Hasoker Paramechaber Bahishila Acher Umesa Kedarka Yishava Hasoker Shemesa Kedarka Bahashol Mashalam Hasoker. Now, again, I rent it to Stan. Stan lends it to Ken. It dies naturally. Ken's liable to Stan. Stan's not liable to me if he swears. And so as a result, if the Im Isa, if in fact Rabbi Yochanan's statement is true that you can't give it to a second watcher, lema lay, ein ritzoni ishia hepikdoni biyad acher. Shouldn't I be able to say, I didn't want my item to go to Ken? I didn't give permission for that. So Amar Le, Rabbi Ami explained, in that case in the Mishnah is talking about Bishin Nasno Lo Lahashil, where I gave it to you in order to lend out. I said it would be fine for you to lend out to Ken. Well, 1 second, Ihaki Labalim by Shlume. Well, 1 second, if I gave you permission, explicit permission to go and lend it to Ken, well, then you are my shliach for lending it to Ken. And so as a result, why should Ken be liable to you according to the Tanakama? Everybody should agree that Ken should be liable to me. So we're going to change the case a little bit to Amrulay Ladadtach. We're going to say, no. It's where I told Stan, yes, you're renting it. By the way, if you want to lend it out, you have the right to lend it out to whomever you choose. So now Stan is not my agent to lend it out to Ken. Stan is lending it out on his own to Ken. And so as a result, now if it dies of natural causes and Ken's going to be liable for that, according to the Tanakama, he'll be liable to Stan and not to me. Okay, so that was challenge number 1. Challenge number 2.
But the original owner is still entitled to receive the cow back again, right?
Well, if the cow's dead, remember, so
well, it's on the money for the cow, whatever. He's still
no, that's the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama says that in the case of me renting it to Stan lending it to you, you pay Stan, I get nothing. Because remember, once I gave permission for that. Because remember that when I rented it to Stan, I got paid for the fact that I rented it to Stan. And so as a result, if it were to have died in Stan's possession and he would never have lent it to you, I would get nothing also. So as a result, there's no difference. The only difference is that now somebody is going to make money on my cow. And that happens to be Stan, according to the Tanakh. And you're exactly right to raise, oh my gosh, I can't believe that is what the halakha is, because you're just thinking like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi would say exactly like you, Ken, that, hey, that doesn't seem right. The owner should get whatever payment exists. Exactly. And that's in fact what Rabbi Yossi says. Okay, but before we get to Rabbi Yossi, because that's going to be tomorrow's daf, Masiv Rami Bar Chama. So now Rami Bar Chama is going to say, also asking on Rabbi Yochanan's position, hey, there's a Mishnah that we're going to learn in about a week that on Daf Mem Bet Amud Aleph, Hamavkid Ma'os Eitzel Chaveiro. If you leave money with somebody else and Sararan, and you put them in you bind it, and the person who's watching it binds it all up, and he throws it over his back in a very easily pickpocketed backpack, or Masaran Levno Vito Hakatanim, or he gives it to his young children that are below the age of majority. So again, not able to watch something well. The Nal Bifnam Shalo Karoi, or he doesn't lock them up well. In all of those situations, Chayiv, he's going to be obligated to pay Shalosh Shamar Kederach HaShomrim, because he didn't watch it in a regular way. Even if if the guy was unpaid, these are negligence situations, and therefore he's going to be liable. Now, what's the implication? Taima diktanim. Isn't the whole point here that he gave it to his young children? Hagadolim, if he had given it to his adult children, Putter, he would have been exempt. So Amai, why should he be exempt according to you, Rabbi Yochanan? Nema ein ritzoni shi'eh bigdoni biyad acher. Shouldn't the owner be able to say, I didn't want you to give my possessions to another person? So Rava explains, defending Rabbi Yochanan, Kol hamafkid, as we turn to Lamed Vav Amabet, anyone who gives an item to be watched, al das ishto uvanav humafkid, he is also trusting the person's wife and children, adult children. I should be clear, because obviously the Mishnah is telling us young children are not worthy to be watching. So the point is that's the point, is that Rabbi Yochanan's statement remains true. And indeed, Rabbi Yochanan's statement is saying that if in fact you were to give it to the adult children, that's okay, because when somebody gives it to somebody, they assume that their adult children who happen to be at the home, are people who could also end up watching the item. And Amri Nardai, the people in Nardai, you would said, Dekanami, you know what? From this Mishnah, you can also see Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Because what did we say in that Mishnah? Dekatani, Oshem Asaran, that if you give them to your minor children, well, then you're going to be obligated. So there are two implications there. Implication number one is if you give them to your adult children, you will be exempt. Why? McLeod, and the implication number two, McLeod de acherim, if you give it to adult other people who are not your children, loshna gedolim, loshna ktanim, doesn't matter whether they're adults or children or young, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv, right? The whole point of that Mishnah is to emphasize that it's only adult children that you could give it to. But other people you would not be able to give it to, because if in fact you could give it to other people, why reference children in it? You could have just had that the person who was watching it gave it to minors. Why does it say minor children of his? It's minor of his children. It's telling us that you can't give it to third parties, exactly as Rabbi Yochanan said, Shema Mina. And so, in fact, you can see that, in fact, this is a good proof that this Mishnah is very much suggestive of Rabbi Yochanan. Now, we have everything we've said right now has all been within the framework of Abaye. Abaye said that the reason of Rabbi Yochanan, the reason that Stan can't just give it to Ken without my permission, is because I only trusted Stan to watch and I didn't trust Ken to watch. Not that that's actually true. It just as an example. Now, Rava is going to give an alternative explanation of Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning. It's not about
this is
not trusting Ken as a watcher, but it's going to be about something else. But before we get there, Ken, go ahead and ask your question.
So if a person gives this object to a cow to watch with it, so he implicitly understands that the family members are also included in that watching. In this case, we said adult children, but or his wife, but suppose he has his cousins there or his nephews, whatever. Is it very specific to the wife and his adult children?
That's a great question. I have not seen the details of the halacha, but let me just a second. I've not seen the details, but it would seem that if you knew that they lived with the person, then that would be included. But if you didn't know, or if you specify, because remember, it's sort of like an implied contract. You can always overcome, or usually you can overcome an implied contract with an explicit contract. So if I were to give it to Stan, and you and Stan are cousins, and you happen to be living with Stan at the moment, and I don't say anything, I assume that you could end up watching it also. But if I were to say to Stan, I want you and only you and no one else to watch it, well, then presumably if he gave it to somebody else, it would be a problem.
If you implicitly tell me that when you bring this item over there, it has to go to an adult only, and I give it to children.
No. If you, even if I don't say anything, it's implied. Okay, I don't need to explicitly say. That's what we learned from the Mishnah on Mem that we'll learn in a week. The Mishnah on Mem Bet. That Mishnah makes clear that even if I don't say anything, you give it to children, even your own children, and that's not enough. That is not good watching. Exactly. Okay. So what's the other reason that Rava offers that it could be that Rabbi Yochanan says that Stan can't convey this over to Ken for watching? Rava Hilchasa Shomer Shemasa Shomer Chayiv. The halacha is that a watcher who gives it to another watcher is obligated for the loss. Lomi by shomer sakar l'shamaso l'shomer chinam degaruya degara gara l'shmira. So, and it's certainly the case. Not only is it the case where the paid watcher gives it to an unpaid watcher, which diminishes the watching. Even if you were to give it from an unpaid watcher to a paid watcher, it wouldn't be good. My timer, but I have a different reason. It's not about whether or not Ken is trustworthy from a watching perspective. It's about whether Ken is trustworthy from a swearing perspective. And so I am concerned, according to Rava, not about the watching, but about the oath. So that's the interesting thing. So in the end, this difference will be important in a moment because we're going to have more debate again. So Rava says it's about the trusting the oath, and Abaye said earlier that it's about trusting the person who's watching. So now the Gemara is going to turn to a case of an animal being watched that escapes to the marsh, and we will eventually come back to, and there's going to be a machlokes between, again, another machlokes between Abaye and Rava, and we're going to end up tying it back to this machlokes of whether it's based on trusting the person as a watcher or trusting the person as an oath maker. So Itmar, Pashaba, if somebody was negligent, and now the animal escapes into the marsh and it dies there naturally. Abaye mishmei de Rabba Amar. Abaye says that Rabba said chayav, that you're obligated. Rava mishmei de Rabba Amar putter, and Rabba says no, you're exempt. Okay, because it died. You're right, and now we're going to have the explanations. Abaye mishmei de Rabba Amar chayav kol dayana delo da'in ki haydina. You know, any judge that, and not only that, not only do I say that he's obligated, but any judge that doesn't agree with me, lab dayanahu, he's a terrible judge. He's not a real judge. Lomi bay laman da amar, and this opinion is not only according to the opinion that says that we have elsewhere in Shas the concept of when somebody does something negligent, and now something else happens. But then and this is a great example. So I negligently watch your animal stand, and now that animal escapes. But you know what? Nothing, whatever happens to it, it had nothing to do with the fact that it escaped. It just died of natural causes. Now, as an unpaid watcher, if an animal dies of natural causes, I'm not liable. But now that I was negligent, do we say that because as part of my watching I was negligent, even though the death in the end had nothing to do with my negligence, do I say that in fact I'm liable?
Yes.
You say yes. So you agree with Abaye. You agree with Abaye. So and why am I liable? And you say that even so. First of all, you're saying the sofa ba'onis is chayiv. But not only in that situation, but even if you were to say that in an ordinary case you would be liable, the chayiv, you ella afilu laman de amar putter hacha chayiv. Even ordinarily, if I were to say that when you begin with a liability, you begin with negligence, and you end up with something that's unavoidable, you would not be liable. In this case, where it runs to the marsh, I am liable. My timer, what's the reason according to Abaye? Da'amrinan havla da'agma katla. Because the only reason it died is because of the terrible air in the marsh. And so it maybe, even though it died of quote unquote natural causes, maybe the negligence was a proximate cause of the death. And so as a result, even though ordinarily you might say no liability for tchilaso b'pshia v'sofa ba'onis, in this case we would say
naturally in the presence of where it was supposed to be, not liable.
Okay,
but
so
the fact that it escaped, liable.
Okay, so you're saying a very important. So you would say tchilaso b'pshia sofa ba'onis ordinarily is pater, but you agree with Abaye that in this specific situation it should be chayav. Rabba mishmei de Rabba
How do you
Omar.
come to that? So what was the, so you
What?
want to say, we want to, then we want to say that the Bashia or in some measure caused the death of the animal, even though the
Because
animal escaped.
yes, because the animal escaped to a place with bad air, that may have contributed to the animal's death, and so as a result, Abaye says that is why it's that you're going to be liable.
So if the animal escaped to Shangri-La, beautiful garden and so forth, maybe one would not be liable.
That is correct. That is exactly correct. That is, but then it would depend on whether we say in an ordinary case, tchilaso b'pshia v'sofa ba'ones, do you say chayev or pater? So Stan suggests that he believes that you should be pater, but that's a separate machlokas. What Abaye and Rabba are saying is going to be saying that in this case of escaping to the marsh, it doesn't make a difference which opinion you have. They're going to say their opinion. So Abaye says liable, and now we're going to explain Rabba. Rabba mishmei de Rabba amar pater. Rabba says it's going to be pater. Kol dayana delo dayin ki hai dina, and anybody who doesn't judge like this, lav dayanahu. They're not a good judge. Lo mi bayin laman da amar b'pshia b'sofo tchilato b'pshia b'sofo ba'onis pater. And it's not only somebody who says, not only the opinion that says that if it begins with negligence and ends with a total accident, then you're going to be exempt. The pater, that they say that in this case you'd be exempt. Even ordinarily, if you would say that one who was negligent at the beginning and then there was an unavoidable loss is going to be exempt. I'm sorry. Even if you were to say that that person says that it was chayiv, if you have an initial negligence and then an unavoidable loss. In this case, you would say pater. Why? My time. When it comes to death, it doesn't. The malach hamavis is going to take you at the right time. If you're an animal, it doesn't matter what your story is. It's going to take you at the time that you're supposed to be taken. And so, who cares where the animal was, and who cares about the environmental aspects to it? So that's the story. Now, Modi Abaye would agree with Rava that there would be no liability to ihadra levei mara umesa. That if it actually, after going to the marsh, it walked back to the pen that it escaped from, and then it died. So if it died in its original location, we're going to say depater. Hadrala, because the animal came back before my timer. Hadrala, because it came back before it died. The lake of Lamemer, Havla to Agma Kadla. And that situation, we're not going to say that maybe the bad air at the marsh was what killed it. Modi Rava, and on the other hand, Rava would agree with Abaye that there would be liability. If a thief ended up stealing it from the marsh, because now it's in the hands of the thief. And Umesa Kedarka Begana, and now if it died, if natural causes in the hands of the thief, the chayev, you would be chayev. Why? My timer. To ish shavka malach hamavis, because if the malach hamavis hadn't killed the animal, it still would be in the house of the thief. And guess what? You're liable if you're watching a cow and it ends up in the house of a thief. You're liable. So therefore, that's going to be a problem. So okay, so Amar le Abaye le Rabba. So now Abaye is going to challenge Rabba. Lididach the Amr Hamalach Hamavis. You who tell us that this is going to be in the hands of the Malach Hamavis. Mali Hakam Mali Hasam. Who cares where it's located, right? You're the one. So Haida Osver Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel, the Rabbi Ami. Let's go back to the question that Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel asked Rabbi Ami. Ushani Vishani Le Kishenasnu Lo Ba'alim Rishus Lahashil. Right? He explained when the Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel asked the question he asked, let's go back up to the question, right? So Abamar Mamel asked the question, right? If Rabbi Yochanan is correct, why isn't the renter liable to the original owner in our Mishnah if he then lends the item to someone else, right? Shouldn't the owner be able to say, I didn't want my watched item to be watched by anyone else? And we ended up saying that he gave permission. Now, if you're correct, Rava, that it doesn't make a difference where the animal is when it dies, Ushani le v'shanasno lo ba'alim rishus lahashel. Why did Rabbi Ami have to give the answer of that Stan had permission to lend it to Ken? Why didn't Stan just answer that? In fact, why didn't Stan just answer that? I'm sorry. Why didn't Rabbi Ami just answer that? It doesn't make a difference where the animal is. It died of natural causes. The Melech HaMavis, the angel of death, is going to get that animal wherever it is. So who cares whether he lent it to Ken or he had it in his own possession? So Melech HaMavis, Mali Hacha, Mali Hasam. Why didn't he answer that? So Amrle Ledidchul Demas Nisu. 1 second. According to you, you're the one who teaches that our Mishnah is about caring who is watching the item. But Ein Ritzoni Hey Pigdoni Biad Acher. You're the one who says, I don't want my item to be watched by somebody else. That's why Rabbi Mama was able to ask that question. But according to me, that I say it's not about my not trusting Ken. It's about my wanting Stan to swear. Because I don't necessarily trust the other guy with the oath. But But here, what happens in this situation? When I rent it to Stan, Stan lends it to Ken, Stan still needs to swear. So I am getting the oath that I asked for. And so as a result, because I'm getting the oath that I asked for, it doesn't make a difference. That whole question goes away. And so as a result, the whole question goes away. And therefore, I'm not troubled by the fact that Rabbi Ami answered something that was inconsistent with me, because Rabbi Ami doesn't need to even answer the question according to me. So now Masav Rabbi, so that's piece number one.
So he's not even interested in a shvua from the third person?
Correct. He's not interested in the shua from the third person. And in this case, the third person doesn't even have to swear because he admits to liability. So there's no oath at all.
But he admits to liability to person B. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know the original owner.
He may not even know the original owner. 100%. 100%. So the bottom line is that I got the oath that I was seeking, and so as a result, I'm okay with it, according to Abaye, according to Rava, excuse me.
So then he doesn't even care. Rava doesn't even care about the person C. I gave it to you. You're responsible for it. It doesn't matter what you did with it. You owe me. You're responsible. I don't care whether it went to C, D, E. I'm dealing with you.
As long as B is swearing, it as Rava understands it, everything is good. Rava cares about who's making the oath. Abaye says no, it's about who's watching it. And again, I don't know. I think this may be one of the cases that we hold like Abaye. But in any event, let's Masiv Rami. So let's finish up. So Masiv Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama asks, "Hello, LaRoche Tzukin Benafla." If you, we have another Mishnah that says that if you take, this is a Mishnah that we'll get to in a while, Tzadik Gimel Amud Bet, that if you take an animal to the top of a cliff and it falls, Ein Zeh Onis V'chayev. This is not an accident. This is not an unavoidable accident and that you had no control over. You are going to be liable. Mesa Kadarka. 1 second. What's the implication? If it died naturally at the top of the mountain, Hareze Onus Upater, you would not be liable at all. Vamai Lemale, why not let the owner say Avira Dahar Katla, that maybe it was the mountain air that killed it? The Ha'inami Uvtsana Dahar Katla, or maybe the exhaustion of climbing the mountain killed it. So Hakabamayaskina. No, and therefore that isn't that problematic to Abaye's understanding, who says that you should be that you are not liable. Meaning that he who says that you are liable when it goes to a marsh, but he agrees, of course, with the Mishnah. So how come this Mishnah seem to disagree with Abaye? So how come I asking Shehela Lamira Shamein V'tov? That no, we're dealing with a situation where it was a beautiful pasture at the time. It was the Shangri-La, as highlighted by Stan. Well, Ihachi Naflanami. Well, then if it falls, why should the guy be liable? Shahaya Lola Tokfa. Well, he's liable because he should be holding on to it tightly. Below Takva, and he didn't do so. Ihachi Ema ratio. Well, 1 second, what about the first part of that Mishnah? Also, Larashe Tzukim V'Nafla, if it goes up on its own to the mountaintop, Hareze onus, that's unavoidable. Ibaile Lamitkafa, shouldn't he have held it so that the animal couldn't run up the mountain? Lo, Sricha Shitakafato, V'alsa. He did try to grab it, but it went up anyway. Takafazo Yarda, and it overpowered him and it fell. The point is that in this situation, he tried to stop it, but there was nothing he could do. The animal was just too strong. So, all right. So now we have concluded our discussion of the Tanakama of our Mishnah, and now brings us to Rabbi Yossi's position that the borrower pays the owner, not the renter. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
So what happened with the cliff here? That how is that different from the marsh?
Well, that's the question. That's exactly the question. And we ended up highlighting that there were two differences. One, it's considered a good space, and the animal went there and is considered a good space for grazing the animal. And so as a result, that's why it was proper for him to take it there. So that's the difference between that and a marsh.
No, but one could contend if he took it, the animal's on the edge of the cliff. Let's say the animal gets scared. The animal had a heart attack. So why he shouldn't have brought it there?
Well, again, the assumption of the Gemara is that it was a reasonable place. That the qualification, the further qualification of that Mishnah is to say it was a reasonable place to leave the animal, to bring the animal.
I went to the Grand Canyon and saw the mules going down the trails, and they always walk right at the edge of the cliff.
Wow.
And they never fall.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying. But these are not necessarily mules, so they may not have been as expert in their cliff hanging abilities, but you do see goats on cliffs all the time. So, but the bottom line is that we're talking about, it could be, right, Highway 1 in California just collapse. So, you can have a collapse that the animal can't, as good as an animal could be, if the edge collapses, there's not much that the animal is going to be able to do. All right. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great day.